Thank you for coming out. My name is Bill Tyler. I'm the curator of the Historical Society, and I'm thrilled to see such a great turnout today. Especially want to thank Ms. Torrey and her Lunenburg High School history class for coming. I think it's an awesome way to learn history. Probably more entertaining than sitting in a classroom. So, the performer is going to introduce herself. So, without further ado, we're good to go.
A fine day to you all. I am carrying my famous alligator portmanteau. I am wearing my famous red shawl. And I've heard that you're a very ruly crowd, so I've also brought my famous gavel. In the back there, don't let me have to use it. My shawl and my gavel are in the Smithsonian. So would you like to hear my story?
Yes.
Excellent. Tenacious, intelligent, high-spirited, sour old maid. These are the adjectives that have described me through my 86 years. And I hold them as a badge of courage, and I deem them all to be true. So how did I become these things? Well, it started in the small Berkshire hamlet of Adams, Massachusetts. I was born there February 15th of 1820. My parents were Daniel Anthony, who was a Quaker, and Lucy Reed, who was a Baptist. Oh my, interfaith marriages were not popular back then, and my father's Quaker meeting house was no exception. As a matter of fact, when they came back from their honeymoon, my father had to go in front of the board and make 3 concessions. He had to apologize for marrying the woman he loved. He had to agree to raise his children Quaker. And even though my mother never became a Quaker, she could no longer sing, dance, or wear colorful clothing. Now, it is said, a few days before their wedding, my mother went out in her best dress and danced the night away. And when my poor father had to sit in a chair and watch her. She also hummed lullabies to her babies. So you see, I got a little bit of my rebelliousness from my mother as well. So what was it like to be raised Quaker? Well, we couldn't sing or dance or have toys, except for my rag baby. But more important, females got the same education as males, because in the Quaker religion, we are all equal under God's light. Now, 4 of us will be born in Adams. My older sister, Guelma, who we called Gula, myself, my sister, Mary, and my brother, Daniel. When we move to New York, there will be Hannah, Merritt, and poor Eliza, who will die before she turns 2. Now, my father was an entrepreneur, and he decided to build a small cotton mill on Tofford Brook that was just down the way from my house. There he had 26 looms. They were manned by 22 girls between the ages of 8 and 16. Do you think they were getting an education? Now, if these girls lived far away, say upstate New York or Vermont, my father had the responsibility of giving them room and board. We could have up to 11 girls at a time sleeping in a very hot, cramped attic. Now, he also had a mercantile store in my home, and I always think of my poor mother. Here she is, she has 4 young babes, a husband, cooking for 11 mill girls, and she has to also run the mercantile store. Now, my father sold many of the community goods, eggs and flour, limestone for the stinky outhouses, and he also sold rum, liquor. Do you Quaker Meeting House was happy with that? No. But my father justified it. He said, well, I'm not drinking the spirit, therefore it's okay to sell. That was until one night, a man died inebriated, froze to death in the middle of winter. And even though my father hadn't sold him the liquor, he felt responsible. Then and there, he started making his workers sign a pledge that they would not drink. Because you've got to realize, a lot of men are coming into the mill and they've been drinking. They get injured. Also, the children that are working in the mill are hungry and dirty because their fathers are drinking the money away. This is our first social cause, temperance. Okay. So, things were so great that we moved to Battenville, New York. There, my father ran a bigger mill and a bigger mercantile store. I was 6 years old when we moved. Oh, we had the grandest house in town. I went to school, public school, and there, the male teacher was teaching the boys long division. Well, I wanted to learn long division, but my teacher said, you're a girl, you'll never use it. I went home and told Father, and he yanked me out of that school so fast, and he started a school for the community children, proving to me when there is a problem, find an answer. Now, when I got older, since we were considered wealthy, my older sister Buller and I got to go to a finishing school in Pennsylvania. It was $125 per child. Now, doesn't sound like much now, but that was a handsome sum back then. We were there 2 years. And then in 1838, the banks will be in a ruinous state. By 1839, there's a full-blown recession. We will lose our house, our mill, and everything that we owned, including property that my mother had before getting married. Because you must realize, people, once a woman married, you no longer existed. If you made money, that went to your husband. Say you had a horrible husband that beat you and your children. You could leave, but the children were his property. I immediately started doing work for property rights for women. Now, we traveled around a bit before we eventually land up in Rochester, New York, which will become my place where I will be buried when I die. I was a teacher for a while, no offense to any teachers. It wasn't my thing. Besides, I was only being paid a quarter of what the male teachers were being paid. So we moved to Rochester. It's the first time that I saw a Negro. And I say Negro because that is the word we used back then. I met many famous Negroes. Harriet Tubman. Oh, the Quakers were very much involved in the Underground Railroad. And although my family never housed a slave, I knew the goings-on and the machinations in my town. I also met Frederick Douglass. I would become so close to Frederick Douglass that when my father passes in 1863, he will do the eulogy. Yes. But the most important person I met was Elizabeth Cady Stanton. I think you call them best friends forever now. Whenever I perform for children, they go, best friends forever. She was my BFF. You see, I met her after an abolition meeting. She was coming out with another friend of mine, Amelia Bloomer. They were sporting the latest fashion, a short dress with long pants. It was the first time that they were introduced was in Amelia Bloomer's newspaper, The Lily. What do you think they started calling those short pants? Bloomers. Yes. No, I tried the pants. They were comfortable, but people were more interested in what I was wearing than what I was saying. So I returned to my very somber, humble look. So what was so great about me and Elizabeth? Well, I prodded and she produced. We were two minds with one goal. We knew if the women did not get the right to vote, we would never move our station in life. Now, I had become quite a good lecturer. And Elizabeth, oh, she could write a speech. So what a team we made. Unfortunately, Elizabeth, like all my other friends, was getting married and having children. Elizabeth would have 7. I would even send letters to my friends admonishing them for having so many children. Didn't they see there was a cause that needed to be addressed? So what I would do is I would go to Elizabeth's house, take care of her 7 little darlings. I would cook puddings. Now, I brought the suffrage cookbook. There are 5 pages on puddings alone. It was a big thing back then. So I would cook the puddings, mind the children, so Elizabeth could write the speeches. But I was the only one going out, solo, because all my friends were home doing wifely duties. It was awful. The inns I stayed in were unbearable. Bed bugs were my friend. The food was terrible. But do you know what bothered me the most? It was the loneliness, but more importantly, the indifference from the women I was trying to help. You're going to realize there were a lot of women that were against suffrage. A big group was in Boston. They felt that if a woman could vote, it would degrade the bond of marriage. And besides, wouldn't we just vote the way our husbands told us to? So, I'm on the road. And then the West starts to be opened. Will states and territories come in free or slave? That is the question. Now, I start abolition, my second cause. I decide that a bunch of us are going to go out on a lecture tour. Bad move. If I thought being solo prior was tough, our lives were in danger. There were many people, even up north, that were not happy with the potential free slaves. And so, I started brandishing signs that said, no union with slaveholders. And then, in Syracuse, they held a rally where they burnt an effigy of me and they walked down the streets of Syracuse. Yes, we had to shelter in place many times. So, in 1860, a tall, skinny lawyer is going to become president. Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator. Do you think I'm happy? I'm going to give you a hint. I am seldom happy with politicians and their policies. I considered Mr. Abraham Lincoln, as you call them now, posers. For you see, when he first gets in office, he is okay, fine with the Runaway Slave Act. He doesn't really care if territories and states come in free or slave. And he's against the black man becoming a citizen. It isn't until the Civil War begins to churn that he's going to change his tune. Now, we all know what happens. He gets into office. The southern states secede and make the Confederate States. And then they decide to bomb Fort Sumter. The war is on. Again, I am out all the time. I have put all my other causes, all my property rights causes, my women's rights causes, on the back burner to fully focus on abolition. And it's going to come back to bite me, because when the war is over, everything I fought for has been receded back in the courts and the judicial systems. I learned, do not wait for a war to abate. Well, we all know how it all ends. The Union wins. Now, this is where it gets just a little technical. I'm in New York with Elizabeth Cady Stanton. In Boston, there's a group under the head of Lucy Stone. All of us agree that there has to be a 13th Amendment, basically to uphold the Emancipation Proclamation and free the slaves. We're all in unison. Then comes the 14th Amendment to make the black man a citizen, and the 15th to allow him to vote. Do you think I'm happy? No, why am I not happy? AP's out there. Why am I not happy? Where are the women? I've been working 17 years. I don't mind going in hand with the black man, but I do not want to go behind him. Now, everyone in New York is on my side. Everyone in Boston calls it the Negro's Hour. Let the Negro get the vote, and surely the 16th Amendment will allow women to vote. We are going to have a horrible dispute. As a matter of fact, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and I will start the National Women's Suffrage Association. Lucy Stone has got a counterpart and start the American Women's Suffrage Association in Boston. I am heartbroken. These were once my friends in abolition, and now they've turned their backs on me. Can't they see it's the woman's hour too? And so we will not speak for 21 years. And Frederick Douglass has aligned himself with the Boston group. I will not speak to him for 21 years. And that will be one of my greatest regrets in life, was the damage it did to our relationship. Okay, so I'm still full force, women's rights. That's all I'm going to concentrate on now. Elizabeth and I, we decide to go across country. I had two brothers in Kansas, and they had been giving me the first-hand reports of the bloodshed out there over the slavery issue. And although we are conscientious objectors, both of my brothers did fight for the Union. As a matter of fact, my brother Merrick, he actually aligned himself with John Brown. Luckily, he didn't follow him to Harper's Ferry, where John Brown was abducted and then murdered. I considered it. As a matter of fact, we will raise funds for his widowed wife and children. So I'm always going across the country, and on one trip, I'm with Elizabeth, and we meet this man, George Francis Train. Oh, he's handsome. But he's the supporter of all bad causes. But he's rich. And he says to me, I have the money. Why don't we start you a newspaper? Because you're going to realize anyone who was anyone had a newspaper back then. All my friends said, don't do it. He's a charlatan. He's bad news. But I agreed because I wanted the paper so badly. Well, yes, he fronted the money, and then he got arrested in Ireland. And he was totally useless to me. In 4 years, my paper will go $10,000 in debt. My friends will say, Susan, claim bankruptcy. Because you see, I'm a single woman, I can claim bankruptcy. But I won't do it. It will take me 6 years, but I will pay back every penny of that debt. So what was in my paper? Well, the paper was called The Revolution. In it were many things to better women's lives, but the most important thing that was mentioned over 200 times was restalism. We call it abortion now. Restalism was named after Madame Restel, a very wealthy woman who was performing illegal abortions in her very affluent house. Now, she didn't have any deaths on her face, but many women were dying by quack doctors performing illegal abortions. Yes, we called it restalism, infanticide, and child murder. Now, being Quaker, I am pro-life. And so I approve of all of these articles. Now, in 1872, there's going to be another election. It's going to be Ulysses S. Grant and Horace Greeley, who is one of those people in Boston. Oh yes, once a friend, now an enemy. I state I will cut off my right hand before I throw support for that womanizer. And so I decide I'm going to do the lesser of two evils. I think Grant is a drunk and incompetent, but he's my man. So, on November 1st, of 1872, myself, 2 sisters, and 14 other women voter registered to vote at the local barber shop. There'll be 3 men there, a Mr. Marsh, Mr. Hall, and Mr. Beverly Jones. I will go in there and I will present my case. I'm going with a theory by Francis Miner called The New Direction. In it he says, women are inherently citizens, therefore we should be able to vote. Well, I convinced them to allow us to register. They will do time for allowing us to register. Now, 4 days later, I place my vote. I run home and I write, Elizabeth, I've gone and done it. On the 15th, there's a warrant for my arrest. On the 25th, I get a knock on the door. It is a Deputy Sheriff Keeney, a lovely man, very apologetic. He says, Miss Anthony, when you have some time, could you come down to the station so we can arrest you? I said, is this how you treat your married criminals? And he said, no, we usually lock them up and put them in a paddy wagon. I said, well, let's go. And he said, oh, no, we don't need to put handcuffs on you. And I look out the window and I said, where's the paddy wagon? He goes, oh, no, that won't be necessary. I said, you hire a buggy right now and you bring me down to the station. And he did. And as I got into the cab of that buggy, I said, this is the only free ride I'll ever get from Uncle Sam. So now I'm in prison. I want to stay there. Because if I stay in prison, I can write a writ of habeas corpus to cut through all the red tape and go directly to the Supreme Court to hear my case. And if they agree with me, it's all over, right? We can vote. But my lawyer, Mr. Selden, a lovely man, can't stand to see a good woman in jail, so he pays the $1,000 bond. Well, I'm not happy, but I've got 16 months before my trial. And believe me, I wasn't home sipping tea. I was going cross country. In Monroe County alone, I did 22 lectures on the rights to vote. And so, in June of 1873, my trial begins. The Honorable Judge Ward Hill, misogynist, instructs the all-male jury that I'm guilty, that they're going to find me guilty, and he's so confident that they're going to find me guilty, he's not even going to poll them in the end to see the verdict. I called it the trial that wasn't. It was a sham. I wasn't even allowed to speak in my own behalf. So, of course, he finds me guilty. He says, finally, Miss Anthony, do you have anything to say? Well, I have many things to say, Your Honor. And then I go on a tirade how he has trampled on every right I own. At the end, he says, because I want to go back to jail, right? I want him to get so mad at me, put her in jail. He says, well, I'm going to impose a $100 fine. And I say, I have no intentions of paying 1 penny of your unjust penalty. And I never did. Now, when President Trump had come into office the first time, he wanted to pardon me. My family said, oh, no, you don't, because she doesn't think she committed a crime. Okay, so I'm getting a little older now. I'm slowing down a little, but I'm going over to Europe now because it's an international women's suffrage association. I'm going back and forth across the country, but I know that I'm getting older. But I'm happy because women that are coming out of college now, they're not getting married right away and having babies. They are coming to my cause now. Intelligent women. And I know that I won't see the passing of the 19th Amendment. As a matter of fact, I will die 14 years prior to its passing. But I know it's going to happen. Okay? Now, another thing I couldn't believe was the notoriety all of a sudden of myself. When I first started off, I was hated. to my career, I was still hated, but I was respected. Now, all of a sudden, I'm a celebrity. I'm sitting next to Wild Bill Cody at the Chicago World Fair. I am overwhelmed with the acceptance I get now, and no one respects me more than my girls, as I call them. Now, on my 80th birthday, they will throw a party for me. Each one of them will place a yellow rose on my lap, because yellow is a sign for suffrage. And I will make my famous speech. I will say, with women like this consecrating their lives to this cause, failure is impossible. Less than a month later, I'll die of pneumonia. But I'm going to not stop my story there, because there were two women I had my eye on. When I decided at the age of 80 to hand over the presidency of the now National American Women's Suffrage Association, because we had joined, I chose Carrie Chapman Catt. She wanted to play nice with the politicians. I also liked Alice Paul. Alice Paul did not want to play nice. As a matter of fact, Alice Paul had been in England and Scotland, and she had been arrested there with the Pankhurst sisters. And she learned techniques. She learned about hunger strikes. And she also learned to apply as a political prisoner, because you got more freedoms. So she comes back to America, and she says, I'm done playing nice. So what she does is the night before Woodrow Wilson is inaugurated, she decides she's going to have a women's suffrage parade. 5,000 of them showed up. 500,000 people were in the crowd, and a lot of them were not happy with us. And the police were told not to protect us. Over 100 of us will end up in the hospital by the end of that parade. And do you know who tried to save us? The Boy Scouts. They made a human chain so that no one could get at us. Go Boy Scouts. Another thing Alice Paul did is, World War I had started, and she decided she was going to form the Silent Sentinels, a group of women that would stand in front of the White House with their poster signs, very much like the ones I have here. They wouldn't say a word. They did it for 2 years. One night, the police, who were told not to protect us again, got into a scuffle with us. And a bunch of us, about 30 of us, were arrested. Now, most of these women were older women, respectable women. We weren't thugs. We were treated horribly. One woman, a 70-plus-year-old woman, was hung by chains to a ceiling. One woman had a heart attack. And they were placed in cells. While Alice Paul is going to say, hunger strike. So everyone stopped eating. The warden says, force feed them, which was barbaric. Well, this gets out to the paper. And Woodrow Wilson says, release them. We don't need this negative publicity. It's starting to happen. Now it's going to come to the ratification of the 19th Amendment. You need 3/4 of your states to ratify. At this time, you need 36 states. We have 35. It's coming down to Tennessee. You don't want a southern state determining women's rights, but here we are. Now, Carrie Chapman Catt is there. As a matter of fact, she has a hotel room below the Jack Daniels suite that's giving away free shots if you don't vote for suffrage. So she goes into the room, it's past the Senate, now it's in the House, and all the men are either wearing red roses saying to suffrage, or yellow roses saying, let's go. She counts the roses. They're going to be 1 rose short. Comes down to the last man, a 26-year-old man named Henry Burns. He has his red rose. He's ready to go like this. And he says, aye. His colleagues are like, what are you doing, man? Well, than his mama. Smart man. And so, on August 20th of 1920, 100 years after my birth, the 19th Amendment will be passed. It's called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment because I had done much of the work for that when we thought that it could possibly be the 16th Amendment. Yes, failure is impossible. Organize, agitate, educate, and anything is possible. Thank you. Well, I'm fascinating, so there has to be some questions. Yes.
Why didn't you ever get married? Was your girlfriend more than a girlfriend?
Yes, well, I was considered handsome in my day. I had many opportunities. As a matter of fact, there was this one wealthy man who had a beautiful sleigh with a brazier with warm coals in it, so I put my little feet on it. And I got along very well with him. And then he ruined it by asking me to marry him. I always said, the men I want, I cannot have. And the men who want me, I will not have. Any other questions? Hey, Pete, come on. You have to have a question. Yes.
Where did Brownell come from?
Oh, Brownell. Yes, Susan B. Anthony is Susan Brownwell Anthony. It was my uncle's name. I hated it. That's why I just used B.
Where are you buried?
I'm buried in Rochester.
In Rochester?
Yes. In the end, my sister Mary was the only one who outlived me. And once my mother died, it was just her and I in our little farm in Rochester.
Oh.
Yes. Yes.
Did your parents support you in your cause?
My home was filled with charity. And education was paramount, and social cause was the utmost. All of my family supported me. My sister Mary never married. She became the superintendent of her schools. Any penny she had, she gave to me. I had very wealthy friends, and they tried to help me keep my newspaper afloat, but I was just getting too much in debt. But my whole family, my brother Daniel, he became an editor out in Kansas. I always used to say, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'm kind of like a Tudor file. I like the medieval period. I always used to say, oh, I'd love to sit in on Elizabeth I's talks. No, I would rather sit in on the Anthonys when they're talking about the social causes that they're going to do. Yes?
Maybe a little off on this. Was the women in Wyoming allowed to vote?
Okay. If you go to my museum, which I don't think you will, it's 2.5 hours away, you will see a lot of sunflowers. That is the flower I took up as my symbol. It is the state flower of Kansas. It looked like Kansas was going to be the first state to ratify. They were not. It was Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. And I always used to think, why these states? Why did they pass? The women had been voting in local elections for quite some time. And I always just say, why did the men out there think it was good? And this was my answer. Because if you're going in a covered wagon across the United States, your wife is your partner. So you don't care if they have a say in their government. Another one of my big enemies was the liquor industry, because they kept saying, if you allow women's suffrage, there's going to be prohibition. So for many, many years, because you're going to realize, we're a bunch of immigrants coming over to this country who like a lot of beer. And a lot of European businesses had a say in the propaganda against women. Now, I was not there for the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, It was in 1848. I will not go to my first one until 1851 when I meet Elizabeth Cady Stanton. They called the people who went to that first meeting a bunch of Nazi men and brawling women because they wanted to masculize the female suffragists, and they wanted to make a man that supported them look like he wasn't a real man. Any other questions?
Can you discuss a little bit more? You haven't actually, about your relationship with Sojourner Truth. Was there much of one? I know there was some contention, but
There was a little bit of contention. Sojourner Truth was a preacher, and her famous speech was, "Ain't I a woman?" I respected her, but we were two very strong personalities. Same with Harriet Tubman.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions? I have one. How did I pay off $10,000 in 6 years? Well, I sold tracts, you call them pamphlets now, and I held lectures. And as I said, I was getting popular. People were coming to those lectures, and I started getting paid. As a matter of fact, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she will join the Lyceum tour, where they are guaranteed lectures across the country, and she was very well paid. She died 4 years before me, and I was devastated. Any other
What
questions?
year did you die?
Excuse me?
What year, what year?
I died in 1906, March 13th of 1906 at the age of 86. Yeah, and she died in 1902. And I was
I
devastated.
remember it well.
Two women's organizations end up combining, because before they were,
Oh, we were so far apart
Yeah.
for so many years. I always try to hand an olive branch to Lucy Stone, who was not having any of it. But then in 1890, for some reason, she took the branch. We were not good friends after that. And Alice Paul and Cherry Catman Chat hated each other because they had two different approaches on how to pass the 19th Amendment. Yes.
Will you come back to life to help us today?
It's taking me 2 weeks to get my ground again, okay? I read before the election, I would go out and I would say, I don't care how you vote, but vote. Because we worked way too hard for the right. And when people say, oh, women were given the right to vote, we took it. Anything else? Well, I have made a lovely treat from the suffrage cookbook. They can be used as hockey pucks. But I realized there weren't many ingredients back then. They're called coffee cakes, not the kind of coffee cake you're thinking of. It's basically a biscuit. They're very hard. I suggest liquid. And the ingredients are there if there's any allergies. And this was the suffrage cookbook that I got it out of. It also has that 5 pages of puddings, if anyone's interested. And here is a card. My company's called Historically Speaking. I do not charge for my performances, but I do put out a donation jar for the Susan B. Anthony Museum. My goal is to raise $3,000. I'm up to almost 1,000 right now. So if you have anything you'd like to donate, I would appreciate it. I know you're all poor high school students. But, so please, have a cookie. They're in the back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
While I sort of have you as a captive audience here, I'd like to shamelessly plug a couple of things that we've been working on at the Historical Society. You may not know that the Historical Society is not a town of Lunenburg organization. We're not supported by the town. We're a private 501c3 charity. So we exist on donations and membership. So one of the things that a struggle for us is visibility. A lot of people don't know, first of all, we exist, and even where we exist. If I show of hands, could I see how many of you know where we are in town? Well, our staff doesn't. So that's our struggle, and so we try. We're on social media. We have these programs, try to get interest. But one of the things we're working on right now is some of you may be familiar with this book. It's called Lunenburg, The Heritage of Turkey Hills, otherwise known as the Red Book. It was written in 1978 on the occasion of our 250th anniversary. And it's basically a general history of Lunenburg. So we thought it would be a good idea, since we're coming up on our 300th anniversary in 2028, to come up with an updated version. It's not going to replace this. This is going to stand alone the way it is. But as you all know, Lunenburg has changed a lot in 50 years. One of the big changes for myself personally is Whalen Park is gone. I know some of the high school students that don't have any memories of that. But to anybody that does, I'm sure you miss it as much as we do. So the other thought we had was, I don't know if you're familiar with these books called The Images of America. It's a series of books that a lot of cities and towns have. So we have one in Lunenburg too. Both of these, by the way, are for sale at the Society. I'm not trying to sell anything to that. I just want to, well, I am. So we thought, since Whalen is gone, we thought that it would be a nice thing to produce a book on Whalen, exclusively on Whalen. It's going to be called The Images of America, Whalen Park. And it's in the hands of the publisher right now. We worked extremely hard, the whole staff, for about a year. Garnishing, getting photographs, and as many photographs as we possibly could get. It was a Herculean task to meet the requirements for this company, but we managed to do it. And we're hoping for publication sometime in maybe the spring of 2025. So when they're available, we'll certainly have some sort of a opening or some sort of a signing or something like that. But I just wanted you to be aware of what we're working on. And one last thing is we were fortunate enough to have be given some of these funds. Some of you may be familiar with it, called the American Rescue Plan, ARPA funds. We received about $16,000 worth of money to do some much needed improvements to our building, the infrastructure, supplies. So that's some of the things we've been working on. So we'd love to have you come and visit. We're open every Wednesday from 9 till noon or by appointment. We'd love to have you come and take a look at our museum. We have an awesome selection of different, from Lunenburg from 1728 all the way till now. We have a lot of different things. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy the treats.